The quiet buzz of a downtown coffee shop was shattered when a white police officer stormed in and demanded a black man leave the premises. The man had done nothing but sip his drink and mind his business, but when he calmly reached into his coat and flashed an FBI badge, the color drained from the officer's face and the entire room froze. It was just another Tuesday morning when Marcus Reed stepped out of his black sedan and walked into a small, locally owned cafe on the corner of Main and 7th. The air was still cool, and a light breeze carried the scent of fresh pastries and roasted beans through the open door. Dressed in a tailored dark gray coat and black slacks, Marcus looked like any other professional heading to work. Except, he wasn't just another office worker or salesman. Underneath his coat, tucked securely in a chest holster, was his badge: Special Agent, FBI. But today, he didn't want to be an agent. Today, he just wanted peace. He had worked a full night shift, finishing the last of a weeks-long case involving interstate fraud and illegal firearms. He was tired. He didn't want anyone's questions or looks. Just coffee, a muffin, and some time to go over the new case files on his tablet before heading home. The cafe was quiet, with soft jazz music playing and only a few other customers scattered around. Marcus liked it here. It was low-key, out of the way, and usually free of drama. He walked to the counter and gave a polite nod to the young woman behind the register. Large black coffee, no sugar, and a blueberry muffin. Please, he said with a relaxed smile. The girl didn't return it. She looked at him a little too long before punching in the order, saying nothing but the total. Marcus didn't think much of it. He'd seen the look before, cautious, unsure. He just paid, thanked her, and took a seat near the back corner where he always sat when he came here. He pulled out his tablet and earbuds, letting the music drown out the soft murmurs of nearby conversations. For a moment, he was in his world, again flipping through digital notes, highlighting key suspects, and sipping hot coffee. But not long after settling in, he noticed something odd. The same girl at the counter was whispering into her cell phone, eyes darting between him and the door. Another employee leaned over and glanced in his direction before quickly turning away. It was subtle, but unmistakable. He knew the signs. He could almost feel it. Someone was calling the cops. Marcus took a deep breath and looked around. He wasn't doing anything suspicious. He wasn't even armed visibly. He was just a black man sitting in a coffee shop, using a tablet. And yet, somehow, that was enough. He thought about leaving right then, just to avoid the hassle. But a part of him refused. Why should he? He wasn't breaking any laws. He wasn't causing trouble. Why should he run from a place he had every right to be in? He tried to ignore the tension and turned back to his tablet. But less than 10 minutes later, the front door flew open with force, and the room turned tense. A uniformed officer stepped in, his boots heavy on the tile floor. He was tall, built like an ex-football player, and wore a look of authority mixed with irritation. Marcus didn't react right away. He watched the man scan the room, then walked directly toward him, as if there had never been a doubt who he was. Here for, excuse me, the officer said in a loud, commanding voice. We got a report of a suspicious individual loitering here. I'm going to need you to leave the premises. The cafe went silent. Every eye in the room turned to Marcus. He slowly pulled one earbud out and looked up, completely calm. Suspicious for what exactly? He asked, not raising his voice. His tone was even but unmistakably clear. The officer's eyes narrowed. You've been sitting here a while, making some customers uncomfortable. Management wants you gone. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Management said that. Or you're assuming that? He glanced at the counter. The girl behind the register had vanished into the back. The officer stiffened. Sir, I'm asking you to leave now. Marcus knew the tone, knew the threat underneath it. If he was any other man, any man who didn't know his rights, this could go badly. He could be cuffed, dragged out, maybe worse. But Marcus had something most didn't. He didn't move quickly or reach suddenly. He moved slowly, deliberately, and reached inside his coat. The officer's hand twitched toward his weapon, and a few customers flinched in their seats. Then Marcus calmly pulled out a leather badge wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. Special Agent Marcus Reed, he said. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The officer froze. Everything in the cafe stopped. You could hear the hum of the fridge, the clink of a spoon in someone's teacup. The color drained from the cop's face as he stared at the badge, blinking once, twice, unsure of how to respond. Marcus stood now, tall and confident, not angry but firm. You sure you want to keep asking me to leave? He said quietly. No. One moved, no one spoke. The power dynamic had flipped in an instant, and everyone could feel it. The air inside the cafe was still thick with silence as the officer stared at the badge, visibly struggling to figure out what to do next. His shoulders, once puffed with authority, now sagged slightly under the weight of his mistake. Marcus Reed didn't blink. He kept the badge steady, letting the silence drag out long enough for everyone watching to understand exactly what was happening. The young couple in the corner stopped pretending not to notice. An older woman near the window put down her newspaper and leaned forward. Every set of eyes in that cafe was locked on this moment. The officer finally cleared his throat and took a half step back. Look, I'm just responding to a call, he said, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier confidence. We got a report that someone was ... acting suspicious. I didn't know you were with the bureau. Marcus tilted his head slightly. And what exactly was suspicious? Drinking coffee, wearing a coat, being black in public. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The tension in the room deepened. A few people looked down at their phones, or cups, suddenly uncomfortable with their own silence. The officer shifted from one foot to the other. I can't say, the cop mumbled. Just doing my job. Marcus lowered the badge but didn't sit back down. No, you were doing something else. You walked in here and went straight to me. Didn't ask any questions. Didn't check with staff. You assumed the black guy in the corner must be the threat. That's not doing your job, that's profiling. The officer's face flushed red. I didn't mean any disrespect. But you showed it, Marcus said, cutting him off. You showed it the moment you tried to intimidate me in front of a room full of people. You didn't de-escalate. You didn't ask questions. You barked orders. Because people like me, in your eyes, are suspects, first until we prove otherwise. The officer was quiet now. The weight of the moment had finally settled in. From the back, the cafe manager finally stepped out, her eyes wide and face pale. She looked like she'd realized this had gone far beyond what she expected. Marcus saw her and gave her a long look, but said nothing. He turned back to the officer. You know how lucky you are? He asked. If I'd flinched, if I'd moved, wrong. If I wasn't who I am, you could have put me in cuffs. Or worse. Or because someone made a phone call and described a suspicious man who looks like me. The officer's mouth opened, but no words came out. Marcus didn't wait for an apology. He knew one wouldn't come, not a real one. Anyway, I'll be filing a formal report, Marcus said. Name and badge number. The officer hesitated, then gave it. Marcus typed it into his phone without another word. Then he turned toward the counter and looked directly at the manager. Is it true you asked him to remove me? He asked her plainly. She looked startled, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I didn't call anyone. I think someone else ... maybe a customer ... I'm not sure. You weren't sure when you watched him walk up and try to throw me out. You didn't say a word, Marcus said. His words weren't angry, but they struck deep. The manager looked like she wanted the floor to open up beneath her. Marcus picked up his tablet and coffee. I'm done here, he said calmly. Then he turned to the rest of the cafe, giving them all one last glance, just long enough to let the moment settle into their memories. Without another word, he walked out the door. Outside, the sunlight felt harsher than before. Marcus paused at his car, set the coffee on the roof, and let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands were steady now, but his heart still beat hard beneath his coat. He hated moments like this, not because they were rare, but because they weren't. He wasn't surprised. He was just exhausted. He sat in the driver's seat, closed the door, and took a moment before starting the engine. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his supervisor. Call me when you're free. I saw the video. Marcus blinked the video. He quickly opened a browser and searched. Sure enough, someone had filmed the whole scene. It was already posted on social media, racking up thousands of views. Comments were pouring in. Most were supportive, calling out the racism, the misuse of police power. Others weren't. The usual trolls were there, questioning why Marcus had to show off or pull rank. He shook his head and leaned back in his seat. He didn't want this kind of attention. He never had. But now the story was out in the world and there was no taking it back. What happened in that cafe wasn't just about him anymore. It was bigger than coffee. Bigger than one cop. It was a truth caught on camera and the world was watching. The sun had barely moved in the sky, but everything else in Marcus Reed's world felt like it had shifted. Sitting in his car outside the cafe, he watched a viral video again, this time with the sound off. Even without hearing the words, the expressions told the story, the officer's smug confidence melting into panic. The silence of the onlookers, the quiet strength in Marcus's face as he held up his badge. It didn't feel like watching himself. It felt like watching a moment that belonged to the public now. Strangers were dissecting it, praising it, criticizing it. Thousands of people had seen the way he was treated. But now, that meant something. More responsibility. His phone rang again. It was his supervisor, Special Agent Dana Cole. Marcus let it ring twice before answering. You good? Dana asked immediately. I've been better, Marcus replied, resting his forehead against the steering wheel. You saw it? Yeah, everyone's seen it. It's all over the place. Facebook, TikTok, even the local news picked it up. I've already had 3 calls from the Bureau's public affairs team. They're expecting a statement. A statement, Marcus repeated, a little surprised. I didn't even want to make a scene. I was just trying to get coffee. Dana sighed. I know, but you know how this works. Once it's out there, it's out there. We can't ignore it. They're trying to control the narrative before it spins out of our hands. Marcus closed his eyes. Great. So now I'm the face of some public debate I didn't ask for. You didn't ask for it, she agreed. But you handled yourself better than most would have. Calm, professional, respectful even while being disrespected. That counts for something. I don't want to be a hero, Marcus said. I want to do my job, go home, and not worry that sitting in a cafe will get me arrested or worse. I get it, Dana said gently. But you and I both know the story hits deeper than that. It's not just about the badge. It's about who gets believed, who gets protected. People are talking. Marcus, maybe it's time we did too. There was a pause. Marcus finally said, I'll come in. At the field office, the mood was strange. A few colleagues nodded to him with that awkward kind of respect, the kind that didn't quite know how to handle what had happened. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Wordless stares followed him down the hallway, and for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like an outsider in his own workplace. Inside Dana's office, she gestured for him to sit. She was a sharp woman in her early 50s, calm under pressure, and respected across the bureau. Marcus had worked with her for 6 years. She didn't waste time. They're not forcing you to speak, she said, sliding her phone across the desk. It showed a rough draft of a press release, but they want your voice in it, your words, not just the bureau's. Marcus read it quickly. It was clean, polished, and safe. Too safe. This reads like damage control, he said. It is, Dana admitted, but it's also a chance. You can tell people what actually happened, what it felt like, not just what the video shows. Marcus sat back in the chair. And then what? They pat me on the back and say I'm brave. Maybe send me to a few community outreach panels. Meanwhile, the cop gets a week of paid leave and is back on the street in no time. Dana looked at him closely. Do you want him fired? He shook his head. I want him to learn. I want him to understand that the badge doesn't give you permission to act out your bias. I want the people who sat in that cafe and said nothing to think about why. And I want whoever called the cops to realize that they made a decision that could have ended my life over absolutely nothing. Dana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, then maybe say that in your own words. Marcus spent the next hour drafting a personal statement, his voice. Not the bureaus. He didn't talk about being an agent. He talked about being a man, a son, a brother, someone who'd had to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal. He wrote about the fear he carried, not as an FBI agent, but as a black man who couldn't take a sip of coffee in peace. And he wrote about the silence of the people around him, how that silence hurt more than the officer's words. When he was done, Dana read it, then nodded. That's real, she said. It's going to make some people uncomfortable. Good, Marcus replied. Comfort is part of the problem. Later that evening, the bureau released the statement, pairing it with a short message from Marcus himself. The internet reacted fast, some praising his honesty, others calling him dramatic, and still others digging into his background like he was the one on trial. But Marcus didn't watch the reactions. He didn't care about trending hashtags or comments. He had a job to do, and this moment, as strange and heavy as it was, didn't change that. Still, something had shifted. A truth had been seen, and for once, it wasn't just ignored. A week passed, but the fire didn't die down. The video of Marcus confronting the officer had become more than a viral moment. It had grown into a symbol. Civil rights groups began referencing it in public discussions, and national news networks brought in legal experts to debate it. Was it racial profiling? Was Marcus being too sensitive? Was the officer simply doing his job? These questions flooded airwaves and filled comment sections, as if his dignity was a matter for public vote. Marcus tried to stay focused on work, burying himself in case files and investigations, but the noise found him everywhere. Reporters that showed up outside the field office. Strangers approached him on the street, some to shake his hand, others to challenge him with smug comments and loaded questions. It wasn't the attention that bothered him, it was how everyone assumed they understood him now, as if that one moment in the cafe defined who he was. He didn't ask to be famous. He didn't ask to be anyone's symbol. He just wanted justice and peace. But peace felt further away than ever. One evening he sat alone in his apartment, staring at his untouched dinner while the muted TV played yet another panel discussion with his name in the headline. He picked up the remote and turned it off. The silence felt heavier than the noise. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. This wasn't what he signed up for. His phone buzzed again. Another message from a journalist asking for a follow-up interview. He ignored it. Then a second message popped up, this time from someone he hadn't heard from in a long time. Saw the video. Proud of how you handled yourself. I know Dad would have been to Elijah. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Elijah was his younger brother. They hadn't spoken in over a year. Their last conversation had ended in anger, argument about responsibility, risk, and fear. Elijah had never liked that Marcus joined the FBI. He thought it was turning his brother into part of the system that had always treated them like suspects. Marcus had tried to explain that he wanted to change it from the inside. Elijah hadn't bought it now. After all this time, that one sentence hit him harder than any of the headlines. He thought for a moment, then typed back, "Thanks. I didn't think anyone in the family even saw it." The reply came fast. "We all saw it." Mom couldn't stop crying. Marcus swallowed hard. He hadn't called his mother since the video went viral. He'd been afraid of what she might say, afraid she would be angry or disappointed or terrified for him. He had thought keeping distance was protecting her, but maybe it was just protecting himself. He called her the next morning, she answered. On the second ring, Marcus, yeah, Ma, it's me. There was silence for a beat. Then her voice came in soft. I was waiting for you to call. I didn't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, baby. I saw it all. Marcus felt something crack inside him. Something small but real. I didn't want you to worry. I always worry, she said with a sad little laugh. That's what mothers do. But I'm proud of you. You stood tall. You didn't lose yourself. Your father would have been proud too. Hearing her say that brought a lump to his throat. His father, a schoolteacher, had raised Marcus and Elijah to be strong but thoughtful, to stand for what was right, even when it was hard. He passed away 3 years ago, but Marcus still felt his voice in moments like this, calm, steady, guiding. Spoke for a while, longer than they had in months. She told him the family had been glued to the news, that his nieces had asked why Uncle Marcus was on TV, and that his uncle in Detroit had gone around showing everyone the clip on his phone, like it was a family trophy. Marcus laughed, genuinely, for the first time in days. But the call also reminded him that this wasn't just about him anymore. His family had skin in this game. His name was being used in conversations about justice and race and policing. If people were going to speak about him, then maybe it was time he started speaking for himself loudly. Later that week, Marcus accepted an invitation to appear on a live town hall event hosted by a national network, not as an FBI agent, but as himself, a black man, a public servant, and a witness to what injustice still looked like, even in broad daylight. He sat in a chair under the bright lights, across from the host, with cameras rolling and a small crowd watching from the audience. He took a deep breath before the first question. What went through your mind, Agent Reed, when that officer walked up to you? He answered, I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid for the version of me who didn't have a badge, the one without a title or authority. That's who I thought about. That's who I stood up for. The room fell quiet for a moment. Marcus didn't want fame. He didn't want applause, but he knew now that silence wasn't an option, not when so many people like him still walked into cafes, classrooms, and stores and felt like suspects just for existing. He had a voice, and now, finally, he was ready to use it. The months that followed changed everything for Marcus Reed, but not in the way he expected. The video had faded from the headlines, but the impact lingered. The town hall had led to speaking invitations from colleges, civil rights organizations, and even within the bureau itself. He wasn't just that agent in the cafe anymore. He had become a voice in a conversation that people could no longer ignore. Still, even with the new attention, Marcus never let it distract him from the work. He kept showing up every day, carrying out his investigations, chasing leads, writing reports. But something in him had shifted, something deep. He used to believe his job was about enforcing laws, solving crimes, protecting citizens. Now he saw it differently. His job, his real mission, was to stand in the gap, to use the badge not as a shield for himself, but as a tool to open doors for others, especially those who were never given the benefit of the doubt. One afternoon he was asked to lead a training session for local law enforcement, focusing on bias awareness and community trust. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same kind of officer who once tried to throw him out of a cafe now sat in front of him, listening. Some officers were clearly uncomfortable, arms folded, skeptical, but others leaned in, listening, taking notes. Marcus didn't preach, he told stories. About growing up in a neighborhood where sirens meant duck and hide, not help is coming. About his father being stopped on the way home from work for fitting a vague description. About the fear his mother still carried, even with a son in the FBI. And he told the story of that day in the cafe, not for sympathy, but to hold up a mirror. This isn't about bad cops versus good ones, he said. It's about blind spots. It's about who we assume is dangerous, who we decide belongs, and if we don't challenge those assumptions, we're failing the people we swore to protect. When he finished, there was silence, then cautious applause. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real. That evening, while packing up, the officer who had confronted him in the cafe walked into the room. Marcus hadn't seen him since that day. The man looked different, tired, quieter, less sure of himself. He walked over, hesitated, then spoke. I've been going to counseling. Voluntarily. My department, they made it clear I needed to do some work. Marcus didn't say anything. He let the man speak. I just want you to know, the officer continued, I was wrong. Not just that day before that. For a long time, I saw threats where there weren't any, because that's how I was trained. Not officially, but you know what I mean. Marcus nodded slowly. I do. The officer swallowed. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say it. Out loud. Marcus studied his face. There was no smugness, just discomfort, honesty, growth. It's not about me forgiving you, Marcus said. It's about what you do next. Who you speak up for, who you don't look away from. The officer nodded, then left. Marcus stood alone in the empty room, feeling something lift, not quite closure, but a step toward it. Weeks later, he returned to the same cafe, not to prove a point, just to be normal, to have a coffee, to sit in the same spot by the window and read his book like he used to. The same barista was working, and when she saw him, she smiled awkwardly, like she wasn't sure how to act, but she didn't say anything. She just made his drink, handed it to him, and said, "It's on the house." Marcus nodded, "Thank you." As he sat down, a few patrons looked over, clearly recognizing him, but no one said a word. There was no tension, no whispering, just quiet, and that, to Marcus, was a small victory. Sometimes progress didn't look like marches or headlines. Sometimes it looked like a quiet man sitting in a coffee shop, undisturbed. Outside the window, the city moved on. Life kept happening. Injustice still existed, but so did resistance, so did truth. And so did change, low, uncomfortable, but real. Marcus sipped his drink, opened his book, and felt, for the first time in a long time, at peace. The world wasn't fixed, but it was listening. And for now, that was enough. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. Your voice matters. Subscribe to The Black Struggle for more powerful stories that speak truth to power.